And we are recording on Thursday, December 7th. Pearl Harbor. What's that? What was Pearl Harbor? 40, 42?
41.
41 or 4? I'm a total like OCD savant with dates, heights of skyscrapers, casualties. I don't know what it is. I can never 41 or 42. I don't know what it is. Every other day, what do you want? June 6th, 1944 at 8:16 a.m., 102 minutes, World Trade Center. I've got it all. I don't, there's something about it no matter what. It always,
And it's okay. Some of us have that problem, with certain things. So,
it's,
yeah.
it's, it's my handicap. But so that was 41, and that'd be 82 years ago today. So, in memory of that. And so, yeah, Thursday, December 7th, 2023 at 10:12 a.m. Eastern Time with Mr. Mike Vecchione. And yeah, this will be what we haven't talked since before Thanksgiving. And as we slowly, I guess, wind down this year, Mike's been on here a million times before. All the books are in the description. They're also over your shoulder on the bookshelf. I can tell you without looking. And but we're talking about Fallen Angel, which you did part one, and then this is part two, and then it was originally going to be part three, and I think you're now in the talks for part four. And
Oh,
Mike is
going to
now an
talk about,
elitist. You're an elitist
yeah.
now. You can say you're not, but you're an elitist now. Mike was actually affected by the writer's strike in Hollywood. So you can say you're not above us. You can say that you don't eat caviar in your private plane, but you clearly do, because I don't know anyone else affected by the writer's strike. So Mike is no longer one of the common people. He is an elite. He does go to the UN and give speeches, so he is no longer one of us. So I don't know. Don't trust him. But the links to the books are in the description. Mike is going to tell you guys who he is and introduce himself while I rudely post the live link. Mr. Vecchione, please take it away.
First of all, the only time that I get past the UN is when I'm driving in my car and I'm going to someone's house or something in Manhattan. About as far close to the
Guilty.
UN as I get, or
Guilty.
dropping someone off in Manhattan. But in any event, thanks very much for the introduction. And we're going to talk about part three today, not part four. You're going to have me back one more time so we can finish this up.
No, book. No, but I was talking not book three. I was talking
Oh,
part two. Or no, we're doing, this is book two. This is what I meant by
right.
part two.
Right. Okay. And it's part three of the book. And let me just introduce myself. For those of you who haven't heard me or seen me on Tommy's podcast, first of all, I want to thank you again for having me back. And my name is Michael Vecchione, and I'm a writer now, and an attorney. But I used to be an assistant district attorney in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. I was chief of the Homicide Bureau, chief of the Rackets Division, first deputy district attorney, and I've been there for a long time. I was there for a long time and did a lot of things. Handled a lot of cases, a lot of investigations, did a lot of trials, and now I'm writing about them. So, Fallen Angel Book Two is a continuation of the series that began obviously with Fallen Angel Book One. And the setup for those of you again who haven't either read it or heard me before is it's a what I call a true crime fantasy. It's a story. It's a crime novel, but unlike other crime novels, the crimes that are depicted in the novel are not made up. They're actual cases that I handled myself. And the fantasy comes in terms of the wraparound and how do I wrap these crimes together. And I do it with a good versus evil battle. And the good is a prosecutor who's recruited to take on the ultimate evil, the devil, who has found his way to Brooklyn to upset the life in Brooklyn, New York. And he's been very successful in other parts of the world, other parts of the country, and has come to Brooklyn to wreak havoc. And the reason he was successful in the other parts is what he would do is instigate crimes and then affect the outcome of the trials when someone was arrested. So if someone was arrested for murder, he would make sure that witnesses disappeared, evidence got screwed up, the prosecutor may have fallen off down some staircases, broke his leg, couldn't handle it. So things of that nature. So what happened when he came to Brooklyn is the Vatican, who recognized this phenomenon, recruited or came to the United States and recruited the Justice Department to put together a group to set up a war with the devil. And since Brooklyn was ground zero, They needed a prosecutor who could take on the devil, was strong enough to fight him and to win. And with knowledge that he was behind these crimes, it gave an advantage to the prosecutor to neutralize what the devil would do to make sure that the people he instigated to commit the crimes were put in jail. So that's the setup. And book one was kind of the introduction of the Michael Gioca is the name of the prosecutor, and he was the chief of the rackets division in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. And he was recruited and kind of observed when the devil had committed or instigated a particularly heinous crime, and he was observed by both the devil, who figured out that something was going to happen in terms of a prosecutor being recruited to do this, and as well as the group in Washington. They wanted to see whether he was up to the task. So the first crime that's in book one is kind of the test case for Michael, and he passed it with flying colors. And then he's approached and asked if he wants to take this battle on full time, and he does. Now, no one else knows about this group, about his battle, other than the head of the agency that has been put together, and he's a former assistant attorney general named John Caldwell, and Michael's mentor in the book, and his lifelong friend, a Catholic Monsignor whose name is in the book is Sal Romano, and Romano is the one who basically went to this group and said, "This is the guy you need to hire in Brooklyn because he's the best." And Michael, from that point on, takes center stage when a case is recognized as having been instigated by the devil, and they're particularly heinous crimes. You read book one, and you know that there are some horrific murders that the devil instigates, and there were cases that I did. And book one was very successful, and as you mentioned, I was affected by the Hollywood strike because I sold book one, and a pilot episode was written, and now it is being taken out into the marketplace to about, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 locations, networks, etc., by my agent out in Hollywood, and I'm waiting to hear. And I was told that I'd be hearing something soon. So the pilot's terrific, and I really want to, and I really hope that it gets done because I think it's going to be a terrific television show. So go ahead, Tom. What you going to ask a question?
Yeah, I want to make a selfish insertion. In terms of people not wanting to kind of completely perpendicular to what we're talking about, though, it just popped in my head, though, in terms of people not wanting to, the podcast is in 5 days it'll be 40 years old, and when I know people that I'm like, you should start a show or you should start a whatever, I don't want it, it's going to take so long. And I always kind of give them the bullshit spiel of like, hey, just start and it will, you'll learn it as you go and blah 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 blah. And but in terms of wanting video evidence of it, and don't just take my example, because so it's kind of working for me. So all right, Tommy, well, you're an odd case. Well, no, I mean, as a biology major, as a science-minded person, I've done kind of the left right brain. I've done the polar opposite, and I've kind of done the talking creative side. And again, Mike being a an attorney, you've taken these stories that you did, and you can go back early episodes of us kind of doing these one-off stories, right? I mean, Hand of the Killer or On the Bridge or
right,
all of these things, and you can see your books written. And I think you can even, in one episode, you floated, I think it's after Homicide Is My Business, you said, and you're like, next summer I've got an idea for like kind of a fantasy about like angels and demons. And I said something like, oh, like, right, kind of getting into flexing your creative muscle. And you can see Mike picking this thing up and building this book, and it's a fucking great book. And so my point of saying that, though, is just for the individual, you can do it. It takes time, but you can do it, and you can do it very well. And that's what you've done. So that's both me kissing your ass, but also telling people like, hey man, like you can pick up anything and just start prod and know the first part isn't perfect in the second but as you fourth, fifth, sixth iterations of whatever it is the hell that you're trying to do, you can slowly make it better. And I mean, things that you make, what am I going to do with 5 years of teaching myself Photoshop? Well, now it's the merch store that helps fund the podcast. So it's like, what are you going to do with all these disparate stories that are too small to make one giant book? Well, you string them together. Well, how am I going to string them together? Well, all right, make true crime fantasy. Well, I don't know how to write fiction. Well, fucking start practicing. So just an aside, I wanted to plug that.
Well, you hit it right on the head, because quite frankly, I have, I have box fulls of this information, and that I had, and my summations, I kept them all. And when I had finished Homicide Is My Business, which was the most recent true crime book that I wrote with my buddy Jerry Schmetterer, he passed away, and I was kind of, I don't want to say stuck, but I knew I wanted to continue doing the writing. And I had lots of stories. And my first idea was to try to sell a book of true crime short stories. And book agents who I had worked with in the past said, we can't do that. We can't sell that, because true crime fans want to have a book that, is sort of a full novel book. I'm sorry, a full book, beginning, middle, and end. I'm still not sure that they're correct about that, but I listened to them, and they said, find a way to tie it together. And I did have this idea from way back when, and you're correct about, you just do it. And the most difficult step was the first step, quite frankly. I mean, I sat down at the computer and began, and the next thing I know, I had a complete book. I actually had to take a step back. I sat down at the computer and put together a proposal, because that's the way you have to do this. And I took the proposal to someone, as I told the story before, who I had appeared on several podcasts with, and she is a publisher out here on Long Island. And I went to her and sat down with her, and she liked the idea. And I think I mentioned this to you last time. She said to me, give me a proposal. And I reached into my bag and took out the proposal and handed it to her. And I then got a call from her and telling me that she loved it and wanted to give me this 3-book deal. And I have the 3-book deal. And as we speak, actually, I am in the midst of, I got about 20 chapters into book 3 at this point that I'm writing, and hopefully by the spring, early summer, it'll be out. And I'm happy with it. I'm really happy with it. I had struggled a little bit. I'm going to be very honest with you. Struggled a little bit in terms of, trying to take this particular case that I'm using as the first part of the book and fashioning it into this fantasy. I mean, the case was horrific. It was the death of 2 New York City police officers, killed by a guy who had come out of Attica prison, who had begun, actually was the impetus for the infamous Attica riots years ago. And when he saw the cops on the street, instead of just kind of saying, hello, officer, how are you doing? He kind of approached them in a menacing way and took out a gun and shot the 2 of them and killed them. And that's the basis for part 1 of the next book. And so anyway, what I was going to say is that to your listeners and viewers, if you have an idea, sit down and sit in front of a computer, grab a pen and pad, and just write it down. And you'd be surprised how your mind works, and you could develop it into something like this, as you did, Tom.
A famous writer, Maya Angelou, she's got a bunch of great quotes, but one of the great ones concerns writing. Actually, we can apply it to everything, but specifically writing. And it's just start writing. Just show up and write every day. I'm butchering the quote, but it's along the lines of, and some days it will be terrible. You will write the fat cat sat on the mat wearing a hat. And you'll write something along those lines every day for a month. And it's the worst. But one day, as if respecting your consistency, the muse, the creative spirit will finally stop messing with you, go, okay, and sit down with you and write a novel. But it is
1,000% correct.
Yeah, you gotta show up, man. I had a shit workout today, but sometimes you have shit workouts every day for like, a week, and then finally you feel like you're alive again. But there's something about the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, sometimes you just sit there and it's just dog shit, and then all of a sudden it starts. So
Exactly. And as I said, I ran into some what I guess would be writer's block um a month or so ago. I didn't give up. I would come up here and sit and bang out a few lines and say, you know what, this isn't so bad. So let me try it this way. And then I would
uh
come back and then correct those 4 lines and
yeah,
that kind of thing. And now I'm rolling. Now I'm
yeah,
into this, and I've already have in my mind the setup and how I'm going to,
yeah.
I'm going to meld part one into part two of the book. So
It starts all falling together, and you go, oh, and then there,
yeah,
and then there, and then there, and you go, oh,
exactly,
thank God I
exactly.
started. Yeah. So
What
yeah.
happened with this story in book three? I'm sorry, yeah, the first story in book three is that it turns out that as I sat down and started to think about it and write about it, it was so much, and I hadn't, sitting and starting to write kind of brought back all of the little nuances
Hmm.
of the investigation and the case, and that I had, it was a long time ago, and I had forgotten about it. And I said, oh, wait a second, I have to
Hmm.
put that in. I have to do this. And I would go back, and I did go back to, to my manuscript and insert the things that I had forgotten. And then I had to kind of fix what I had already written to make
Oh,
sure
yeah.
that it worked with the other. So
It's
so
yeah,
it's
it's
a
therapy.
process. The
It's
process. Yeah, it's a process.
it's
So
very similar to podcasting, actually. It's therapy. You start talking about it, and I'll sit here and start talking about shit, and then all of a sudden remember something,
yeah,
and you're like, oh my God. I'll find myself reaching out to friends from 10 years ago. I'm like, I just remembered this. And it there is something oddly poetic about, like, you can't see what you're gonna write, but you have to start writing in order to see what you're gonna write, if that makes
exactly.
any sense
Exactly.
whatsoever.
And
Um,
and yeah, and the other thing about it is that there you hit it right on the head in terms of calling up friends or talking to friends or texting them or asking them questions. The detective or the cop who worked with me on this, who was a detective now, he's retired, but he was a detective, is a good friend of mine, and I talk to him, multiple times a week. So if I'm stuck and I don't remember something about the story, I just pick up the phone or text them and ask them, and then that kind of jogs the memory. And I said, oh, okay, that's the way I got to do this, that kind of thing. So once again, it is a process, and it's and for the successful writers who are out there, the John Grishams and people like that. I always envy them because I think and I believe I kind of say to myself, these guys don't have those problems, but I'm sure that they
they
do.
a
I'm sure that
thousand
they do.
birthday, a thousand
So
man. Stephen King's On Writing is a great one. Charles Bukowski talking about just like staring at the wall and banging your head against it,
yeah,
and then on the last minute, all of a sudden, and he's like, "You don't be afraid to cannibalize other books you've written." Like, no, fuck that one. Take this, put this here. All of a sudden, there, and it is. Yeah, there's a reason why it's so difficult, and it's often just who can hang out the longest. Uh, to already
Tom, I
interrupt.
got it. I just
Yeah,
want to mention one other thing.
yeah.
I've tried a lot of cases in my life, and both as a defense attorney and as a prosecutor, mostly as a prosecutor. And the same process that we just talked about, I would apply to writing summations. And when I would start a case, I had in my mind obviously how the case was going to lay out and how I was going to order of witnesses, what the witnesses were going to call, but it wouldn't necessarily come to me immediately as to what I was going to say at the end and sum up this whole thing.
Mm.
But I knew that it was important for me to think about it. And quite frankly, if you ever saw my files back then, you would see I had one yellow pad, a legal pad that I used to keep. And I'd be sometimes driving home after the day, the trial day, and I would pull off to the side and stop and start writing so
Yeah.
that I could remember that.
Yeah.
And so by the time I got to the end, I would have, 5, 6, 7 pages of ideas in terms of the summations and put them together. And it's the same kind of
Yeah.
process with writing. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there
All
you go.
the notes
Uh,
from I mean,
Yep.
even now we're talking, I know we haven't gotten to the book, but I mean, in terms of what we're doing right now is just talking about the kind of the creative aspect of it, and how
Yeah. Yeah.
it does all slowly start falling together. And what you said about writing summations, I mean, you can go one step further, and it really is anything. I mean, Photoshop. I used to, somebody can say, hey, Mike could say, hey, Tom, can you make me this Photoshop? And it's an idea. The most badass shit was always when you just sat there with a blank canvas and you just went, let's just start moving stuff together. And you'd find a picture of something and be like, okay, I don't know what this is. And you start editing it. And then this would happen. And you just kind of be going about stuff for like a week. And then all of a sudden, it's like you caught a reflection off of a mirror and it made a rainbow or something. All of a sudden
Right.
you do like a double take and you're like, hold on. And you kind of tweak it. And you're like, what's this? And then all of a sudden this beautiful thing starts creating. And then you make it and people are like, oh, I could never be as creative as you. And you say it earnestly, you go, I have no idea how this happened. And
Yeah.
like, so it's not some like, ass kissing me and Mike being like, anybody can do it. No, as you know, writing books and as I know, writing this podcast or doing this podcast, yeah, a lot of hard work, a lot of consistency, sure. Man, yeah, I'm not exaggerating when I say I everyone has it in them. It really is a fucking crapshoot. It's a lottery. It's a weird kaleidoscope. Um, but yeah, I mean, so even now we've just done for 20 minutes. Is we didn't plan that, but you just kind of let it go. And all the links to the book are in the description. Mike's gonna tell you real quick where to also get the books because I have to pee so fucking bad already. I've already crushed 2 of these today. I'm sorry. Then we'll start. Mike, take it over.
Okay. Well, the books are available on Amazon, available on barnesandnoble.com, and they're essentially available wherever books are sold. And in addition to the Fallen Angel series, I'm going to point you to Homicide is My Business, which is my last the last true crime book that I wrote. And that's available in one additional place. It's available on the publisher's website, which is Camino, Camino books.com. And if you're a true crime fan, Homicide is My Business is in my opinion a terrific book for you. It's the story of a hitman who comes to Brooklyn to become a made member of the mafia. He had tried to become one of those in Sicily, where he was a hitman, and the Italian and the Sicilian mafia sent him to Brooklyn because they said it would be easier for him to ultimately get his button, as they call it, which is the membership into the mafia. And as it turns out, it wasn't any easier. He did do a lot of things on behalf of the Bonanno family in Brooklyn and the Gambino family in Brooklyn, but he never was able to achieve what he was hoping to achieve, which is membership in the mafia and become a made man. And as it turns out, the American mafia was not too kind to a Sicilian like him, and they treated him sometimes rather poorly, and it kind of led to his becoming an informant, and that's how I met him. He was the Gambino family put a hit out on him at some point because they thought that well, they didn't think he was going to share in a very, very big jewelry robbery, and they didn't want him to share and things of that nature. And he got to the point where he said, I've had it. And he walked into a police precinct one afternoon and said, I want to talk to the FBI. And from there, the police brought him to the FBI. The FBI then turned him back to the police in New York City. The cops then brought him to the Brooklyn DA's office because, quite frankly, one of his hits was an open homicide that I had. And it was the killing of a chef in a very good restaurant in Brooklyn. And he killed the chef. It was a hit. And there was the family of the chef who actually hired him to kill this guy. And the reason he was killed is because he was raping his own niece. So Luigi Roncesvalli is a terrific character. He became a witness in Ronald Reagan's Commission Against Organized Crime, testified in front of Congress, testified in some big trials. So I recommend Homicide is My Business for you true crime fans, and for you true crime fantasy fans, Fallen Angel is should be your cup of tea. So welcome back, Tom.
Thank you, sir. And With that, I will stop kissing Mike Sachs, and I will shut up and let you start
Let's talk about Fallen Angel
let you
book
start telling the
two.
story, sir.
Yeah. So as I started to tell, I laid the groundwork for what Fallen Angel is all about, and book two, Michael Shioka is very successful in book one. He puts down the devil in each time that he reared his ugly head, and that didn't sit well with Satan. So he upped the game in book two, and what he has decided to do in that book is to go after the core of Brooklyn life, which is family, and each of the crimes in book two is affects families in very different ways. The first story was a firefighter from a very close family who had just gotten married is killed, and then we have a woman who in my book was a former nun, but in real life was just simply a woman who lost her way and left her home and became homeless, and then found someone in Coney Island, and who took her in, and she lived in a concession stand on the Coney Island boardwalk, and was killed by a notorious criminal and arsonist in Coney Island, and it destroyed her family. And so the devil was successful, and in that case, as in real life, the devil actually succeeded. Michael didn't convict the killer in that case, but what he did do was convict him in another case, which the killer committed in another borough. So the devil doesn't win totally. And that brings us to part three. And part three is another one of these situations where the devil goes after a family. And the family is a little different than in the past. It's an immigrant family. The immigrant comes from, in my book, Korea, in real life from China. And he came here to live with his wife. He hadn't had children yet, and to start a new life from where he came from, and he wants to become a businessman and open up a business, and he does, and he was working around and doing the things that immigrants do. They work in the garment center and work in low-paying jobs, and in the area where he lived, which is the Bed-Stuy is what it's called, the Bedford-Stuyvesant area of Brooklyn, he found that a liquor store was up for sale. The owner was selling, and he had gotten together enough money to buy this liquor store, and he became a real cornerstone of the neighborhood. He treated everyone well. He was loved by people, and unfortunately, he was too successful. He was successful, not unfortunately for him, but unfortunately for what happens to him, which is he's actually killed in a robbery of his liquor store. And in real life, the liquor store is held up by three men, one of whom was a New York City police officer, an actual working cop who lived in the neighborhood where the liquor store was situated, but worked in a police precinct, a neighboring precinct. But he knew about the success of the liquor store. He knew that it was always busy, always made a lot of money. And he also knew that on Saturday night was when the owner would take the receipts from the week and bring them to a bank and put them in a safe deposit box, and then close up for Sunday. So the police officer, who was obviously not a good guy and should never have been a police officer, and was always in trouble in terms of needing money. He was a spendthrift. He loved fast cars. He loved big cars. He was a bit of a gambler, and he gets together with a couple of the other thugs and bad guys in his neighborhood and decides that they're going to put together a robbery and hold up this liquor store on Saturday night just before the owner and the person who works with him brings the receipts from the week to the safe deposit box. And as it turns out, and this is both in real life and in the book, he gets there the first time. They get to the location a little bit too late. The owner and his worker had left early. They had closed the store up and gone to the bank. So they have to kind of regroup and set up for the following week. And in the book, this whole idea of killing and robbing this place was instigated by Satan. He meets the cop and his buddies at a club in Manhattan, where he pretends to to know them, and they wonder in the book, how does he know us? Well, obviously he had been he meaning the devil had scouted it out. He knew that what he wanted to do, which was to make sure that this now family run business was affected by this robbery and murder, and so he instigates this thing. He gets the cop off to the side and he says to him, "Look, I know you're in trouble with money. I know where we can get money. I know that," and he lies in the book, and he says, "The liquor store is more than a liquor store. It's a numbers place, and on Saturday night they do a big business, and there's a lot of numbers being taken, gambling, and there's gambling in the back, etc. So if you hit the place, you're going to find you're going to get a lot. You're going to hit, it's going to be a big score." In real life, of course, there was no numbers. He was just a successful liquor store owner, and the cop in the book buys the whole story and says, "Okay, let's plan this thing." And he sits down with his two other guys who he's going to actually do the robbery with, and the devil character who I call Jiz, J-I-Z. It's a name that I've used in part in book 1 as well. And Jiz sits down with them and they plan this whole thing. And Jiz says, "Listen, you guys are going to do this, and I'll be on. I have a police radio, so I can monitor whether or not the cops are going to interrupt you." So, of course, that doesn't sit well with one of the potential robbers, and he wonders to this ex-cop who's the leader of this gang, "Man, who is this guy? We don't even know him. How do we trust him?" And the cop says to him, "Listen, I know that I trust him." And of course, what has happened is the devil has kind of taken over his will and gotten into his mind to make sure that he's sold on the idea that he's trustworthy. He says, "Don't worry about it. This guy's good. Just go along with what I want him to do." And this robber says, "No, I'm not doing this. I'm not going. I don't trust this guy. I'm not going to do it." And he kind of steps away, and he becomes an important character in the story, because after the robbery and after the murder, Michael finds this former part of the gang, former member of the gang, and he turns out to be one of the witnesses at the trial. So the setup is that they are going to go into this liquor store, and the cop is going to get them behind the plexiglass counter, which has been set up in the liquor store because it's not the greatest neighborhood, and it's a way for the owner and his worker to be protected. If someone wants to rob them, they can't shoot through the bulletproof plexiglass. Then they pass the liquor that they buy through this kind of
I've frequented those stores.
Yeah. So they have this little drawer, and they put the bottle in. They push. So the cop has to. So the devil tells him how he can get past the plexiglass, and this is how he does it. He walks in alone to the liquor store. The cop does, and he takes out his police shield, and he says, "I'm a police officer. I really do need to use your bathroom. Can I use your bathroom?" Now the owner of the store, remember, is someone who is very, very well liked, because he's very polite to everyone. He treats everyone very nicely. So here's a cop with a shield walking in, asking to use my bathroom. He says, of course you can use the bathroom." So he opens up the plexiglass, lets the cop in, and the cop goes into the bathroom, and of course he doesn't need it. Comes out in 3 seconds with a gun, and says, "This is a holdup." At the same time, one of his cohorts is waiting outside. He calls him in, lets him into the back. Now we have two robbers, the cop and one of his cohorts in the back, and they say to the owner of the liquor store and his worker, "Where's your money?" The owner says, "We've already gone to the bank. We don't have anything except money in the cash register for change for the next time we open." And he doesn't believe them. Cop doesn't believe him in the book. And he puts both of them down on the ground, takes their wallets out, takes whatever money is in there, searches around, and he can't find it. He gets angry. And in real life and in the book, he shoots his gun and into the ceiling of the store to frighten them. And they, of course, are frightened, but it doesn't materialize. Money can't come from it. It just wasn't there. They just can't make the money. So he says, I don't care what you do. I don't have any money to give you. So in real life and in the book, he knows that it's been unsuccessful. The cop does. And he looks, and the plan was for them to take the money and go and leave, because they have a lookout outside who has a radio to tell him if the cops are coming. And of course, in the book, the devil is supposed to be sitting in a car a couple of blocks away to listening to the radio as well. So it's unsuccessful. And the cohort inside, his accomplice, says, "Let's get out of here." The cop looks up at him and he says, "They saw my face. They got to go." And he shoots the owner of the liquor store. And this is what happened in real life as well, and kills him. The other guy shoots the worker. He wasn't as good an aim, didn't have as good an aim. And instead of killing him, he gets him in the back and fractures his spine. And the guy is paralyzed, not dead. They take off and they regroup. And now they have really nothing to speak of. They don't have any money. And they kind of now they plan how they're going to make sure that the cops don't get them. So they get rid of the guns, and cop goes back to his life as a police officer. These guys kind of go back to their lives as bums, because what happens is, and this is how it begins, at the beginning of the end, the guy who was inside, the accomplice inside the liquor store who shot and paralyzed the worker, he gets arrested in another location for a bank robbery. And now he has got to he's faced with the choice of, what do I do? Do I say something and give up the murder? Or do I take my lumps and go to jail? He's caught red-handed in terms of the bank robbery. So he decides to ultimately come in and give it up. Now, in real life, Tom, I got to tell you that the detectives who got this case was stumped. They had no idea who did this. We have a dead person and a paralyzed individual, and the detective was a great guy, and he worked at it very hard. And in the book, we have this. I call him. I actually used his real name in the book because that's how much I admired him. And he worked at this, and he started to hear things in the neighborhood that there was a cop involved in this killing, and a cop involved in attempting to rob the store. So he does a little more digging. And what does he uncover? He uncovers two witnesses, two junkies who happened to be out at midnight on a Saturday night when the store was closed. And what did they see? They saw the whole thing. They saw the guys walking into the store, and they saw them coming out. And they know them because the cop lives in the neighborhood. The other, his accomplice, is a guy that hangs around the neighborhood. So when the detective gets these two to come in and talk to him, he gets this information in the book and in real life. He now understands that why he was told that it was a cop who was involved. But keep in mind, he's not internal affairs. He was a cop in the precinct, but he wouldn't give this up. He was so angry and pissed off that one of the police officers who he works with, another precinct, but he was a fellow officer, was responsible for killing this hardworking guy who had been around in that neighborhood for 10 years or more, building his business, employing not only himself and his worker, but his kids worked in the store, his wife worked in the store. It was a family business. And of course, when he dies in the book and in real life, the family is devastated. He's there, he's the only source of income for this family. So in real life, the detective comes to me, and I was at that time, I think I was chief of the homicide bureau, and he tells me the story. And now I didn't know the detective, but he really impressed me with, the way he worked, how he was, and his tenacity to bring this whole thing to bring this to justice. So I said, Greg, his name was Greg Saunders. I said, Greg, of course I'll work with you. And we step by step put this together. First of all, we get the junkies, and in the book we do the same thing. And they were very good, in spite of the fact that they had this problem, and maybe a jury wouldn't necessarily believe one guy who says he was out in the street on a cold Saturday night, looking for drugs. But when you put another one together and they tell the same story, I was willing to sell that to a jury, or try to sell that to a jury. And then, of course, as I said before, we caught the break. The arrest of the accomplice in this bank robbery, that now becomes one of the main witnesses. So what I'm left with at this point, and what Gioca's left with in the story, is two junkies, an accomplice, not the greatest case in the world, and the defendant is a cop. So the potential defendant is a cop, and in the book, the devil, of course, makes himself scarce, and as it turns out, that other accomplice who never showed up and said, I'm not interested in being involved in this, he finds out that the devil was never on that radio, and was never going to tip them off. He wanted the death to happen. He wanted the homicide to happen. And when he hears about it, he goes into the precinct, and with an informant, and tells the cop in the book, listen, I know all about what happened, and gives him the whole plan. So now what Gioca has is the two junkies. He's got the accomplice who was inside, who is now selling himself because he wants to get out from under this bank robbery that he has. We have the former member of this gang who no longer wants to be a part, who no longer is looking to protect the people in this gang. And then one more piece comes into play, and that is the brother of the accomplice who was inside, who shot and paralyzed the worker. He is arrested. And when he's arrested, he now knows what happened because his brother was involved. And he now is convinced by his brother to become a witness. Now, in real life, the accomplice who was inside and who shot the worker in the store, he does do this bank robbery. And unfortunately for him, as he's leaving, the security guard, who was an off-duty cop, a retired cop, shoots him in the back and paralyzes him. So he's got a lot of problems, but one of the things that he's trying to save is the amount of time that he would serve in prison. And if he became an informant, he would save some time. And I convinced him that he would. He got his brother and recruited his brother. So now there was a fairly decent case, but Tom, it was all, every witness had a sheet, a rap sheet, and a sheet of former crimes longer than certainly the defendant, who was a police officer. So what Gioca has to do, and what I had to do, was sell the jury on the idea that You may not like these people. They're not the kind of people who you take home with you and invite to Thanksgiving dinner or bring home to mama, but you have to believe them. Why? Because they were there. They were the insiders. They're the people who a guy like the defendant would use to do this horrific crime. And that was the task I had and what Gioka has. So I got to tell you a little bit of an aside. So in real life and in the story, when I'm starting to put together the entire case and Gioka's putting together the case, one of the things that's important for a prosecutor to do is to go to the scene. You know, it was obviously had happened many months back before the arrest. But if I'm going to ask witnesses about the plexiglass or the bathroom or the store and how I need to see it. And Gioka obviously needs to see it. So he gets together with one of the detective investigators from the DA's office who worked with Gioka and who worked with me. And we say, let's go down to the liquor store one afternoon. And because we had heard that the family had reopened it and now his son and daughter were working in the place. Because as I said before, it was their only source of income. They had no other income. And the mother was too devastated to go back and work. So the daughter and son decided to open it up and ultimately they're going to sell it. But until they did, they needed to have some workers there. So I walk in with the detective investigator from my office. And what do you think the first thing we did was? We identify ourselves and we hold up our shields. Tom, you should have seen the look on their faces.
PTSD.
It was deja vu, horrific deja vu hit them, because this is what happened that allowed this cop to get behind the plexiglass to kill their father and paralyze the worker. So they were frightened to death. I mean, it was unbelievable. The look on their face was, I'll never forget it. So it finally dawned on me. And I say to the detective who was with me, his name was Steve. I said, Steve, let's go outside for a minute. He goes, what's up? I said, look what we just did. We walked in and showed them the shields. That's how the bad guy got in here with the shields. He said, oh man. So I said, listen, you stay outside. Maybe if one of us goes back in, I can talk them into letting us look around the store. And I did. And Gioka does too. He goes back in, apologizes, asks, tell him that he's from the district attorney's office and that he's the guy assigned to the case and that he's only there to help them and convict the people who killed their father. And they relent. They let him in and they let me in. And I was able to do what I had to do. But it was really the kind of thing where I said to myself, you idiot, how could you not think about this? And later on, when they came to court to watch the trial, they remembered me, of course. And I had, I just continued to apologize to them because it was just, a stupid mistake. But anyway, so we put this entire case together. And Gioka puts it together. And what we're up against, of course, is the devil who is attempting to make sure that Gioka can't convict. And there are certain things that he does that distract him, and he's got to overcome this stuff. And he finally takes the case to court, and we finally get a trial started. So I pick a jury, and I'm mindful because of, and Gioka is mindful, I should say, of, the instigation that the devil has with, and what he does, the corruption that he attempts to spread in terms of jury selection. Now, in book one, the devil got to 2 jurors and got them to I guess, vote for acquittal of the person who his pawn, his minion, the guy that committed the crime. And Michael had to overcome this. And there was a hung jury, and he realized it, and he figured out what had happened, and he was able to convince the judge in the second trial, the retrial of that case back then, to sequester the jury, to keep them, together and to be guarded constantly until the case was over, because the devil had gotten to them on a lunch break outside the courthouse. So he's mindful of this, and he's careful about picking a jury, and he had in the back of his mind that he would ask the judge to sequester them because of what happened before, but turns out that it wasn't necessary. The case proceeds along, and and the best part of the case, and the thing that really ultimately in my mind that convinced the jury that this guy was guilty in real life and in the book, was when the defendant himself took the witness stand. Now, I did, and Gioca had done a lot of research on this cop. And as it turns out, this was not his first rodeo in terms of this robbery. He was a bad guy, and he was doing things in other parts of the city that resulted in him getting away with it. He didn't, he never got caught. He had big money trouble, as I told you before, and it started to Gioca's investigation into the defendant started to bear fruit, and he was able to put together a cross-examination, because the cop's personality was such that he was never going to be able to just sit by and not impress the jury with his personality and with his job and what he did and the way he looked. He was a handsome guy in real life and also in the book. So Gioca needs to have a cross-examination package of information, and boy, did he find it. And in the book, he uncovers other crimes where the guy got away with. And in real life, this guy was also getting away with things. He would do things that were violations of the rules and procedures, but he had the gift of gab. He was the kind of guy who could talk his way out of things, and he would tell, he would impress his bosses, and they would give him, basically a slap on the wrist as opposed to a suspension, that kind of thing. So when it came time to take the witness stand, he got up there, and I remember this, and I wrote about this when I wrote the book. Tom, you would have thought that, he thought that he was kind of guy who, who, as we used to say in my old neighborhood, who shit ice cream. That's what he thought he was. He was a guy that
never heard that before.
Never heard that one before. Yeah. Well,
shit.
So he's up there and he tells the story, and I listened to his cross-examination, and he's smiling at the jury, and he's nodding, and he's trying to tell them, that he's a good guy, and that's all a big mistake, that the cops, the district attorney's office is out to get him, that kind of thing. And then it's cross-examination time. And rather than be humble when he was asked about things that were not terribly favorable to him, and even admit some of the things some mistakes that he had done, that was exactly the opposite. Tom, Gioca and I got him to the point where I was certain that the jury hated him. I mean, I was certain, because he was as arrogant as you could possibly be. And he fought me. He fought Gioca when he was on the stand. He basically said, "How dare you come after a guy like me? How dare you?" And then I opened up also his financial records, which I was able to get. And I started, and Gioca starts to cross-examine him as to a motive for the robbery. And he says, I have no problem. He says, "I'm a cop. I do overtime, and I make a good salary." Well, I had his overtime records. He didn't do 1 single second of overtime. Gioca gets them, and he's asked him about it. And he kind of shuts up because he can't answer. Then I did, and Gioca asks him about his change. Oh, during the case, by the way, he is in one apartment. And when the trial finally comes, he's living now in another borough. And I know why. And so did Gioca. he couldn't pay his rent and he got evicted. So his on direct, he said, I knew it was time to get out of that neighborhood. I moved to a better neighborhood in Queens, which is more of a suburban kind of place. It turns out he was a liar. He had been booted out of his apartment because he didn't pay his rent. Then I asked him about his car. He said, you had a big, beautiful car, did you not? And so did Gioca. I asked him the same thing. He says, yeah. I said, well, where is the car now? Do you still own it? Well, it was a little too much for me, etc. I said, you don't own it anymore because you couldn't make the payments and it was repossessed. Isn't that right? Well, so they got the picture. And I was very happy when I sat down, and Gioca was as well in terms of the cross-examination. And I'm sure that Jizz, as he was in the book, was watching this, because I wrote it, that Jizz is the devil. He's watching this whole thing. And it was not going to sit very well with him, because this is the guy that he chose to destroy this entire family. He was successful in doing that, but he didn't get away with it. Jury convicts him, right? And as in all the other stories, the devil always seeks revenge when he loses. And in book one, the first trial, the foreperson of the jury is the one who announces the conviction of one of the defendant, and smiles at the mother of the victim when she's delivering the conviction. Well, in that book, the devil takes it out on her and pushes her in front of a subway train, and she dies. In another book, in another story, one of the main witnesses gets killed, and in between, Michael's family is attacked. Michael's father is attacked by someone who pretending to be a doctor, who tells him to take medicine that would actually have killed him if it hadn't been caught. So the devil doesn't want to lose. And in this case, in this one, Gioca is waiting. What's going to happen? Who is he going to take this out on? And he's concerned about his family. And then he gets a call one day, and it's from a detective in Manhattan. And the detective says to him that he got, on the day of the conviction, the newspaper stories were, and the TV stations in New York were broadcasting the story of this cop who'd now been convicted of a murder. And they showed footage of the perp walk. You know what the perp walk is? When he's arrested, the cops take him out of the precinct. He's in handcuffs. They walk him to the car. Well, that's what we used to call a perp walk. So the cop, they replayed that. And this detective in Manhattan started to get phone calls. Several. Who were they? They were victims of a robbery in a restaurant in Manhattan that had happened many, many months before. The robber had gotten away. And they couldn't catch him. And the people who were calling the detective in Manhattan said to him, "That's the guy who robbed us in that restaurant many months before." The defendant in Gioca's case, the cop, and the defendant in my case, the cop, had committed a robbery in Manhattan months before. A robbery where people were sitting in a restaurant eating, and he came in with an accomplice and held all of the diners up, took their wallets, took their watches, and got away. And he got away with it until the perp walk was broadcast again after his conviction in Brooklyn. And now he was arrested for robbing, I think it's 14 people in Manhattan. So that was the revenge, the devil in my book and also in real life. So what happens? He goes to Manhattan. He, as arrogant as he was in Brooklyn, he was that arrogant in Manhattan, and refused to take a deal because he was going to get life in prison basically for the murder in Brooklyn. And his lawyer had worked out a deal where whatever sentence for the robberies in Manhattan would run concurrently at the same time. It wouldn't be anything separate from that. The arrogant guy says, "No, I'm not taking it." So he gets convicted in Manhattan. And the judge sentences him to 14 separate sentences to run consecutively to the life sentence that he got in Brooklyn. So payback is a bitch, as they say, and Satan was not going to sit back and take the loss without extracting some kind of revenge on the guy who he recruited. He was perfect. In the book, he tells him, "You're the perfect. You're perfect to do this. You're a cop. They're gonna trust you, and you got that badge. You're gonna get into this place, which has all kinds of money." And as it turns out, they had, in real life and in the book, they didn't have any money. So the family was devastated. They ultimately, in real life, sold the liquor store, and but I believe the cop, as we sit here now, is still in jail. He's not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. And then after I convicted him. I didn't use this in the book. After I convicted him, I got so many calls from people to tell me, cops now, that this guy was no good. They didn't like him. They hated him. And it was not a surprise that he was convicted. The accomplice, who was in a wheelchair, he got a break from the judge. His brother, who also had been arrested for something else, got a break because they became witnesses. But I got to tell you one last thing. The worker who had been shot and was paralyzed had spent a lot of time. Oh, and by the way, his family he was an older guy, and his family was horrified that this had happened to him. And so that was another family that Satan destroyed, really, in the book. When the trial was on, detectives who I was working with said, "How are you going to set this up? You know, it's important to let the jury know what happened inside that liquor store, how he got past the plexiglass, etc." So I said, "Well, the victim's name was Collins, the person who was paralyzed." He said, "Well, we're going to call. I'm going to get Mr. Collins." He said, "Well, how could you do that? He's paralyzed. He's in a hospital bed." I said, "Don't worry." So I made some calls. The day that Collins had to testify, we wheeled him in his hospital bed into the courtroom. He testified to the jury from a hospital bed, sitting there. Now, Tom, and I write this in the book, there wasn't a dry eye in the jury box. It was so effective. Now, he couldn't identify, or wouldn't identify, the defendant, but I didn't need him to do that. I didn't need him to do that because I had the informants who would give me the identification. What I wanted was to have the jury, and Gioca wanted to have the jury see the horror of what this guy did. We couldn't bring back the victim who was killed, but here was the second best thing: a victim who was alive, who could tell the jury exactly what happened and how this bad New York City police officer, using his shield, which is the symbol of his service to the city, to get into this liquor store and hold it up and kill this guy and paralyze this poor gentleman. So I remember when, after he testifies, we had to wheel him back out. And I watched the jury. They were looking, and just until he left the courtroom. So it was a very effective and very heartfelt, or heart-wrenching, I should say, heart-wrenching time at the trial. So
wheeling in a
so that is part 3 of the book. And hopefully, if you have me back, we'll talk about part 4, which is kind of harkens back to one of the other stories in book 1 in terms of an attorney who is the victim in part 4 of the book. And I'll tell you about that when we get to it. So that's it. Go out and buy the book, folks. I think you'll
buy the book. No, I was also just thinking, negative space, positive.
Tom, I lost your
the audio. This happened earlier. For everybody listening, this happened earlier. I can still hear you. I'll text him. I can still hear you.
I can't, I don't know what happened. I lost the audio.
Hold on, I'll call Mike real quick.
Yeah.
Mike, all right. Well, I can still hear you and see you. I don't know why. I guess you can't hear me. The audio's fucked up. So so we'll wrap this up. I've done this once or twice before where I've had to do it on the phone. But yeah, so if I can hear me, guys, please go buy the book. The book is in the description. You can also buy Homicide is My Business, Hand of the Killer, Friends of the Family, Crooked Brooklyn. And I'll hold the phone up to the mic. Not the mic. I'll hold Mike up to the microphone. Mr. Vecchione, final thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to, again, Tommy, I just want to just thank you again. And it's, you know, it's fun to be with you, and you really are a terrific guy, and just keep up the good work. And I'm looking forward to being back. We can talk about part 4 of Fallen Angel Book 2. So
thank you, sir. Well, Mr. Vecchione, as always, shoot me a text and to remind me, so I'll schedule it. It is Thursday, which is my Friday. So if I don't get back to you today or tomorrow, I will get back to you.
no problem.
And because it's, we got a couple weeks left, Merry Christmas to the Vecchiones. So thank you as always,
Same
Mike.
to you and to the Carrigan family.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. Vecchione, everybody listening, I'll take care. Bye-bye. Merry Christmas, Mike. Guys, till next time. Thank you so much for watching.